so we'll go ahead and we'll get started. And very, very helpful. I've gone ahead and like pre-notated most of these things. Here, black has a choice, A or B. If black chooses something like this, we get a bit of the old school Joseki. We sort of consider this to be like a thickness. It's very hard for white to try to cut any of the black shapes. If white does, black just thickens up immediately. It's one way black could have considered to play. But I do like black's choice to block B. I think it makes a lot of sense. And then here, black should just be careful with how they choose to extend. Leaving 6 spaces eventually will allow white the ability to settle comfortably here with a 2-space base. It's true that even black can check the base with 6, but white can come out at 7 and still has fairly good shape to settle the local area. So it's not really black's territory here. It's going to be awkward later if black has to fill a stone and to save it. Now, the first sort of maybe slightly worse than inaccurate move, I think, comes here at move 12. This move at c10 is a little bit slow when white has the option to approach here, Brett. And the main reason is all to do with Tawari, right? So if we imagine black back off at f3 is the most natural way to play, and then white's going to extend on the left side, white's extending move is typically going to be here. Just make the base, that way if black kicks, it's very difficult for black to come inside this area without giving white a very strong attack. For example, if something like this, then white might even be able to play this knight's move press. Black is not getting a lot of immediate value out of the stone at 6 that's going to have to run. Generally, black is not going to play c10 because c10, or white's not going to play c10 rather, because c10 makes it a bit easier for black to come in. So for that reason, in the Tawari, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to start at c10, and then later, if black plays here, to want to stretch to the left-hand side. So hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. Sure, and then you can trade. So you're only afraid of the pincer, I think, if you're trying to think about this approach as saying, I'm going to get the left side, but that's not really what it means. When you're approaching the corner, you're simply asking black a question. It's like a probing move. You want to know what black's intentions are for the d4 star point. Sure, black can pinch, but if black pinches, it does something wonderful for the left side. It makes it very small, so white doesn't have to care about it. At that point, white will just give black the small side, something like this, and take the bottom left corner, which was much bigger. Yeah, black can extend something like c11. That's fine, but there's no threat to white. White's group in the corner is perfectly safe, and white can come back and settle with a variation like I showed before, maybe something like this. Like that would be good game flow for white. But this one makes it a bit awkward. Now after black encloses here, white stepping at c6 is not the best relationship with c10. Now that being said, there are 3 choices for black. Black can consider A, B, or C. Of the 3, I would typically recommend Q players to play C. And the main reason for that is because this 4th line stone still has an open skirt, check at L17. So if white is able to come in here, it could be a little bit awkward for black to handle. For example, if we pinch, white has a sort of Tesuji method, something like this, to really bother the black group. And after the cut, white has A and B to surround the 3 stones. So black is going to be in danger this way. But if black takes this move to enclose and white comes in, now all of a sudden black is prepared to fight with white. White can still come in, but it's a bit harder for white to make anything meaningful happen. So for Q players watching, I would really recommend enclosing this one to help fix that 6th line gap. 5 is okay, but 6 is usually just a little overextended. And so I like that white came in. Brett, if you want to optimize your coming in method, A and B would be the most common. Understandable. All right, so here I would recommend pulling back. Was this another misclick, maybe the bump, or? All right, because here, here it's kind of tricky because if black has the ladder, then white has to connect the outside. And even like this, it's still a bit tricky because black will still have this one too, right? So it's not like white's going to have a very clean method if black is able to play this Atari. Which is, again, just for those watching, right? The reason why white would typically pull back and then white would try to settle with something like this. I'm sure that's what you were going for in the game. Luckily, your opponent connected and made this group very thick at the corner, but it's also very slow. Now when white extends, white's in good shape. A very classic probe black can do is to peep. This happens a lot in cube player games. But on this board, it's not so good. White has push and then this Kosumi. Now it's not really possible for black to cut anymore. So this is a refutation against this move at 1. So for those watching, this is how you can punish this sort of overhang by black. Now in the game, black plays this M17 move, which is a bit of a standard shape. It's kind of attacking white. It's checking the 4th line stone. It's closing black's skirt. It's a very good move, 90%. No problem. That being said, if black wanted to be slightly more aggressive, this move at N17 is also possible. White, of course, is going to turn and then have to defend, something like this. And now black can choose any number of things. Black can push at A, black can block at B, black can jump back to C. These are sort of the 3 good local moves. Black can jump at D, which is more of a whole board idea, or black can try to settle the right side. Almost anything is playable. There's some variations. I think the one that I've notated on the board starts like this. And there are many different options that I have starting from now. Lots of different ways you guys can go back and explore. Now here, this attach was fine. Black had 2 choices, A and B. Black chose neither of them. It's a small mistake. If black extends at A, white really can only block at 2. If white plays the Hane, then black is going to be able to go through and cut. Something like this. And it's actually very difficult for white to continue fighting. If white extends, black will connect, and now we have a bit of a dilemma. If white blocks, then black is simply going to Hane. White is going to end up dead. Eventually, white has to stop O18, which is threatening to cut. Both cuts, actually, O15 and P17. It becomes very tricky. So white can only really connect, and then black can pull back. This is going to force white to exchange 4-5 and then come back to 6. And then after that, black can maybe jump, something like this. The game is slightly better for black, but relatively even, still somewhat playable. And B is similar to a game move, but a little bit better because white doesn't really have this crosscut. Any of the 5 options... Yes. Hi, Marty. Black has any of these 5 options. All 5 of them lead to working variations in this case against white's crosscuts. So the crosscut's not really going to have much of an impact. Like, for example, if this Atari, we can see a variation that's sort of mapped out. Black has A or B. He can choose. If we Atari from this side, white can only really play this counter Atari. If white extends, we'll connect. This isn't really working for white. If from now we play C, this one might be the hardest one to see. If white comes out, black can simply connect. Also possible to play this Atari. Something like this, for example, black could have co-fighting with white. But if black doesn't like the idea of going for that co-fight, black can of course also connect and then just trap the 1 stone. 9 here is a Tesuji that I just sort of threw into the variation for those that care about these type of things. It's a little bit better than playing this block at 9 in this case, which would be the standard shape. If we block, white gets 10 and 12 for free, which helps white stabilize eye space, then white can turn and defend. But if we play this one instead, the white stones are not yet alive. And after white defends the corner, something like this, black can block at 15 to remove the inside turn. And if white plays something like this, when black connects, it's 4 liberties to 3. So we can see that this is not a working race for white. And then, of course, D. This is one option as well that we have. We can just go for the simple capture variation. It's kind of like playing the one we just looked at, albeit slightly worse. And then E is another one. I didn't really make too many variations for this one, but the idea is fairly simple. We're just going to come block After the cut, white can clamp, we can play here, white can capture, and black can push at the corner. Something like this, black is going to be pretty happy and stable. Okay, white blocking, this is a natural move, but it's a little bit slack. White needed to make one in-between move first. So Brett, in this case, it was actually really important for white to turn. Now, the meaning of this turn, you might wonder what is to be done if this O18 move comes, and the answer is very simple. You can play A, B, or C to live in the corner. Like all roads lead to Rome, you play something like this, and then at any point you can defend your cut or just go straight for the life and death. So it's very likely you play this, black is going to extend, then you block, and the eye space for white in the corner is quite good now. It's very hard for black to have any meaningful life and death threat. But when you don't play this move and you simply block, next move, black can press this R18 point, and it's really, really painful on white's eye space. Locally, if white descends, the shape will live, but it will be barely alive. It's quite painful. Black is going to get many forcing moves. And the other sort of benefit is that black has managed to capture most of this corner in Sente, which for white is not the ideal situation. Okay, now fortunately for you, black Tanuki. This Tanuki is a bit slow when there are urgent moves like this on the board, just because the 3-3 in and of itself, being so rooted in the corner, it happens to be relatively safe. It's a very stable move. It's hard to kill. Even if black got 2 more moves around it, it's not guaranteed that that white stone is dead. So when your opponent is approaching, we can always think if there's anything potentially urgent on the board. We can use that timing to get to the urgent place. Okay, so white defended and black checked the left-hand side. Now here, this attachment is a common shape when white is thinking they're weak somehow. But in general, like, let me think of a good example. Let's go ahead and have, let's say, post this Joseki. Let's go ahead and say we get this variation. In this case, Brett, you would say that this blackstone at 2 is somewhat weak, right? All right, so in this case, for black, attaching at 6 would be a very, very common move. It's unlikely that black is ever going to get a severe attack on the 5 stone. It's supported by the corner at R3. And so we can treat the 5 stone like a very, very strong stone attached to it with the idea of, you know, getting some type of strength, right? If white, like, for example, extends, we can jump, maybe block, Atari, connect, cut, this type of thing. Black is going to get a lot of useful benefit. We don't really care if we're making white stronger. In the game variation, though, it's true that the black stone A can be represented as a strong stone, but the white invasion at B is a very real move on this board. And the problem with answering this black A with this attachment here is that we've removed that invasion. We've taken away a possibility from ourselves. So it's not really the right scenario to do that. So the impression that I got was that maybe you thought this gap was weak somehow and it needed to be defended. And so you tried to defend by Sente. Yeah, like black, the thing is if, let's just have white Tanuki, if black invades, it's a very hard invasion for black to muster. Can black actually be confident that white is going to die here? It's tricky to say, right? Even if it goes something like this, you're going to capture black long before black captures you. So you have to be confident with the reading. It's not so easy for black to come in, but like later, like let's imagine this black Tanuki. Later, white sliding in something here or here is a very playable move. It's something that you have to look forward to sort of break up the black area. But okay, the game variation, we do this attach, pull back, and cut. And sort of the consequence of this choice is that now the entire corner belongs to black. White has lost the Aji. And then black jumps. Possible to play this way, although I'm curious about its overall efficiency. Typically, it's black, we're playing L4 to remove the pincer. One of white's plans when white plays this A is to repinch at 1 in the future. So for black, I would typically recommend going here. This is not about taking territory on the bottom side of the board. This is just about creating stability for O4, preemptively stopping the attack. And if white tries to ever go underneath, we just keep white's head very low. For example, something like this. We can keep white's head low, build towards the center, and then do great things in the middle of the board, for example. But black has a similar idea by jumping here. And then white tanuki. So this tanuki seems to me like, okay, maybe white is thinking about some invasion at A or maybe some invasion at B. Okay, there's a threat there, it's fine. Probably, though, white needed to play something like 1. Or maybe white needs to come inside now. Even if it's just a 1-move exchange, something like this before you come back, it'll make handling the bottom side a lot easier for you. Because the issue with jumping is it's not inherently sente, and by giving black the next move, black can, for example, get ahead with a move like this or like this. It can become very difficult for white to actually get in there. Okay, but instead black takes the more proactive choice. This is also fine. There's a weakness now at A that white's going to have to deal with. Typically, white is protecting by playing this 1-space jump. The meaning of this move is that if like this type of thing is ever exchanged, this shape is already alive for white in the corner. White doesn't really have to worry about life and death, and then later white can follow up with pincer A or B. Okay, here white instead chooses to ignore and flies all the way to G4. And I think this is the point in the game, Brett, where it goes from relatively even for the playing level to black has now got a winning initiative. And the reason that this happens is this move is just a little bit too deep. You're completely surrounded by black stones. And actually, if black just covers you in, something like this, it's actually going to be very, very difficult, given the weaknesses in the corner like this. It's going to be very, very difficult to stop the severity of the attack coming on the bottom side. So, sort of rewinding, what could white have done differently? If white can settle the corner issues by sente, that would be ideal. Then white could think about something like pincer at 1, maybe pincer at 2 to get in. When we want to invade our opponent, we have to look for forcing moves. The 2 stones are much easier to leverage pressure against than the bottom left corner, which is already thick. So that would be where I would look to start. Okay, so then fighting continues here. Black could have optimized a little better by descending. It's very hard for white to swim locally, so taking the base is quite good. Playing this one leaves this idea for white later, where white is able to dodge with 3 and 5. If black plays any kind of like repincer like this, white can do any number of things. This, for example, can get white some eye space. White can still jump to the center. White can cut off the 1 stone. Gives white a lot of opportunities. But okay. And then here, this was just a little bit overplay. White has weak group A, white has weak group B. White is creating weak group C. Naturally, black is going to separate. We cannot let white see. And then I think this is sort of like game-losing overplay. It's just not a working wedge. At this point, if you wanted to continue, you could have thought about maybe something like... you could have thought about connecting, you could have thought about Tiger's Mouth, something like this to aim at the D2 clamp in the future. You could have thought about playing something like 1 to try to allow the stone at the bottom to be sacrificed so that you could move out naturally, maybe something like this. If you can get the stones to see the center, you can sort of escape. Maybe you've got this 1 or like jump. And at any point in the future, you'll be able to slide under here if black doesn't stop it, to make the bottom pick up that black gets here a little bit smaller. Okay, but instead we get to this point. Here, black made a small mistake pushing. Black can just remove all the aji with L2. White's extension doesn't work. Black can counter Hane. But okay, and then after this, yeah, this is just sort of like the classic 2E group situation now for white. White has to find a way to try to settle at least one of these weak groups, ideally with sente, so that white only has to focus on one thing. And if white can do that, maybe there's a chance that through the second half of the game, white might be able to catch up a little bit. Okay, so white played this one, black sealed white in, and then this is really game over for real. My impression was this one of the many misclicks, Brett? Okay, yeah. Yeah, so I put in the comment section here asking, are you jealous? Because this looks like a very jealous move. It's like, oh, black is trying to get all the territory at the right-hand side. I can't let black have any territory there, so you try to invade it. But the... Yeah, but the problem is you can't want the right side, you can't want A, and you can't want B. So you have now a 3-weak group sort of situation beginning to brew, because the corner at A is not alive yet. B is not alive yet. And now you're introducing a new weak group, and black doesn't have any weaknesses. Now, black, of course, being at the level you guys are playing at, black answered. But what do you do if black just ignores and goes here? And so we can quickly begin to see how painful this is becoming for white. You only have one eye. And if black is very careful, you will only ever get one eye. There's no cut here to work with this either, so there's no way for this to really be successful. So at this point, the game is actually over, I think. But black answers a little bit. He doesn't really seem to understand, but okay, he's not making severe mistakes. And then this one again, just a bit too fast. You still have 3 weak groups, and when you're jumping around the board, leaving all these weaknesses, not defending anything, the result that's going to happen is you're going to get busy and one of them is going to die. Just every time, that's how it's going to be. Unless you happen to get really lucky. And then once black drops here, even if white comes to like this one first, like black's plan is going to be, you know, maybe black is going to force something like this, but locally it's only one eye. Yeah, it's already very hard. And then at this point, I think you realized it, and this is where white resigns. So the big takeaway that I would have is, like, the game was probably okay for you up until the point where you started getting jealous of your opponent's areas. Yeah, all right. So here it's just a matter of, if you defend yourself at the level you're playing at, if you just defend your weak groups, ultimately what you're going to notice at some point is the trend is going to be your opponents are going to get ambitious and try to attack you anyway. Like, they're going to overcommit to attacking on attacks that don't work. And if you keep your positions very solid, very strong, you'll have the ability to sort of naturally refute those attacks by cutting their shapes to pieces and ultimately seizing control of the game. The problem is black is clearly attacking your group, and you're not putting in any of the moves to defend it. So every time you do this, it's like taking a loan. You're putting yourself more and more in debt. You owe black more and more moves. So by the time the end of the game comes around, you owe black at least 4 moves, because you've got 3 weak groups and now this G18 area you're playing in. That's 4 areas that you need to play moves in, but you only get 1 move at a time. You know, maybe if white could play 4 moves simultaneously, it would be fine. But to be down by 4 moves is, you know, sometimes the equivalent of being down almost 30 points. Like, the value of a move is a lot. So unfortunately, that was really where white went wrong. What I can recommend is try not to be so jealous. Even if you have to lose some games because your opponent's areas get a little bigger, I would spend a lot of time focusing on just making your groups more stable before invading your opponent's big places. Any questions on this one, or shall I move to the next? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So we'll move to the next one. This one is going to be Zogan versus PG10Q. I was told that the person playing white in this game is a student of Gabe's, and if they're here or they listen or watch this in the future, I am to tell you that in AGA rules, dame count for points. Please make sure you fill your dame. Do not pass at the end of the game and let your opponent fill the dame. They will gain a point every time they do it. With that out of the way, we will go ahead and begin from now. And already I've got it notated as early as move 5. Typically these days, even at Q level, opening knowledge is becoming more and more standardized, so it's becoming easier to play. Here we see a bit of a novelty move by black, enclosing the 2 space from the star point rather than the 3-4 point. Now, typical opening theory would have us play this one, because generally speaking it's more urgent to finish an unfinished corner, in this case the 3-4, than it is to finish a 4-4, which is considered temporarily finished. And something like this we see a lot in professional games, you know, modern and such, and even in AI play, it's a very common move. But okay, here black is choosing to challenge at the upper side with this 2 space high. Maybe it's an indicator black would like to approach at A and go for some big center idea. I can't say it's a mistake, it's just maybe a slightly small concession compared to enclosing at 1. And so white does what any player would naturally do in this case. White is flying to stop black from getting the second enclosure and taking away black's ability to play a 2 space on the right hand side. This is making a lot of sense. And then here we get the first novelty from white. So if A is a novelty from black, then B is the novelty from white. This move is a very, very classic invitation for both sides to play the Avalanche Joseki. For those that don't know, there are 4 Josekis in Go that are often at any one point in time heralded as being like the 4 pillars of complicated Joseki. And those would be the Taisha, the Great Tumble, the Avalanche, which we see the beginning of here, the Magic Sword, which is not a Joseki that really appears very often, for those that wonder. It's a Joseki that starts from this. But nowadays, when we do see the Magic Sword, we often see it via transposition, which I'll get to in a minute. And then the Flying Knife, which for those that don't know what the Flying Knife is, that's when you get a standard 3-3 variation, the Knight's move is played, and then this invitation is given. It becomes very complicated. So those are the 4 complicated pillars. In this case, white is offering for black to play the Avalanche. If after this, for example, white blocks at 1, black A or B would be initiating the smaller large Avalanche. To show that, this Hane, cut, extend, extend, we are now in the small Avalanche, or the Nadare Joseki. And if black extends, white can push, and then cut, and then extend, and now we have the Onadare, or the large Avalanche Joseki. It's basically a contest of who memorized more moves and or trick plays a lot of the time. Even pros have been known to die horribly in endgames prematurely because they've either misread or forgotten variations in the Avalanche. So in general, it's very complicated. At the Q level, I can't really recommend it, but there are people that are always going to be the mad lads that, you know, try to do these things to each their own. Of course, that being said, there are ways to simplify, which I've notated here with C and D. A lot of times you can get a variation like this, where you can simplify the position, avoid the complication. White is getting a wall, black is getting the corner, it's fairly even. And the other one is, of course, you can just connect like this and then go for some pushes and a jump. And this is also quite simple for black to play. This is one of the ideas. And even from the large Avalanche, you can simplify. This is a common one we would see in the early 2000s, where white would play this target 3 rather than cutting, and then white would jump back to 5 to create good development from d4. But in the game, we get another rare novelty move, and for Q players, I will outright call it a mistake, because this is another move that requires you to have near perfect reading, and that's going to be this Hane here. Whenever we have this sort of cresting Hane shapes, complications are always sure to follow, and one of the more common variations is for black to cut and then white to cut, and it just becomes very, very messy. In this position, one of the simpler ways black can play is give Atari at 3 and then extend. White can jump like this. Against the jump, black has the option to exchange this now, or black can play Atari first, then exchange this now. Either way, in this situation, black can come back, kill the cornerstones. It's a relatively simple way for black to proceed from an albeit convoluted and complicated variation. The whole point, what I'm trying to get to, is that white is inviting a lot of messiness here. Black chooses the Hane, keeping it simple. I like this from the black side a lot. Don't play into white's preparation. This extend is perfect. If black had simply extended here, white would have covered. It's good if black can double Hane, but in this case, double Hane is not quite working. So black would have to either extend or tigers, and white getting to cover like this is, okay, fairly efficient for white. So black's extend is a really good direction. White's block was fine, and then Tanuki. So far, perfect way to handle the corner for black. For those wondering, we do not connect at A in the shape because this one singular exchange is not necessarily important enough to save. If we did accept it by connecting here, later the only real benefit we get is maybe there's a peep or a clamp, which could be useful, but we're not entirely sure. And saving the one stone itself right now is just relatively slow. Even after Tanuki, if white cuts, we can simply give Atari and the corner is protected. And if white Ataris the corner like this, there's no way for white to capture with any of these cuts. Black is always going to be able to take white first in a number of ways. And if white cuts this way after the fact, the two stones in the corner are just already dead anyhow. So it's already doing a good enough job of defending our 3 cut, which is the important one. So Tanuki make a lot of sense. Good job for black here. White plays the one space low pincer. This was very, very common quite a few years ago. I don't see it so much in the modern game, but it's still a good move. I like to play it. And then we get this sort of variation. Although the normal Joseki for white is to push this way and offer black either this Atari or this wedge. This has been seen in some games before. And the typical idea is that white's going to extend and we can get into some variation like this. There's a lot of complications. If black defends the cutting point, white can kill the inside stones. Something very similar happens in this game. White chooses to block, putting more pressure on the corner is also possible. And I think here black could have optimized a little bit better. This direction can be fine, giving up the corner, but it's usually only good if black is repinching somewhat immediately. The whole purpose of driving through the shape is to disconnect the A-stone for attacking. If we don't attack the A-stone, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to do this. So given the fact that black decided to Tanuki and come back to this T5 move, it was probably better then for black to play this cutting point, this Atari, and then just live at the corner with B18. This one does allow white to play any number of moves like this to begin attacking the two stones in the center, but as it stands right now, black can just simply leave these alone. In the future, black is going to have moves like A to bring them out, fight with white. But black could play whatever black wants from now. Okay, but black comes back and defends. This is too small. It's a little bit slow. Now this gives white the chance to come back and fix at A, which makes things very awkward for black. Where I'm choosing to play this over a 2-space extension because the 2-space extension still leaves annoying moves like this inside attachment, which black can then use in combination with things like Hane or crosscut in some shapes. When you play tight like this, you remove a lot of those forcing moves from the opponent, and it puts a lot more pressure. If black is made to jump something like this, this becomes another somewhat really slow move. It does get black out, but it does very little outside of that. White's corner is not in danger, it's already alive, and white's 2 stones on the left are very difficult to attack, since the black group itself here is not yet strong. Just to kind of show what that might look like, if white Tanukis and black attacks, white might even just simply jump to the center. If black starts making his own shape towards the middle, white might even think about using this move at 11 to try to stabilize the left by attacking black too. So here, instead, white chooses not to defend anything, and white invades the corner. This one, like in the previous game we looked at, is a little bit hurried. White has problem at B. White has a group that's not quite made perfect shape yet at C. So the result is that if black catches the timing now, black can get a really good initiative going against the white stones. Okay, so black blocks, and really the only goal black needed here was Sente, and black got it. Now black attacks the right side white group. I do like this. We are now prepared to attack it. We've defended our cut. But that being said, a slightly better attacking point would have been at R8. So right idea, just this will be a slightly better placement. The meaning is very simple. If white connects, we're just going to extend to 3. And this one is not creating a bubble between the white and black shape. It's not leaving space here for white to do something. Because we're right up against white and we're keeping everything very concentrated, it's very, very easy for us to handle white's eye space and put a lot of pressure. The drawback, as we're going to see with this one, is that when white kicks, white's already developing really good eye space. For example, white can play this Hane double Hane, and after something like this, white could simply capture, or maybe white might consider this, although we do have to be careful because sometimes black can extend. So you really have to sort of read both and see which one works. In this case, playing at 7 would be fine. If black does play something like this, white can capture, white can connect. No matter really what happens, white is going to be guaranteed clean access to the center, and it's almost already 2 eyes locally. It's very good for white. So that being said, yeah, white should have done this. But white failed to notice something here. When black Sagari to S9 and extends to the second line, black is taken away from white, if we just Tanuki, the ability to play this tiger's mouth. Now, what did this tiger's mouth mean? Well, if we just look at it on face value, there was this Aji of the cut, and then later this descent. It's very difficult for black to connect at T6 here, given the fact that white was going to have this to capture. So at any point, because of the Aji of that cut, we can play this move and black will likely have to defend something. But this means that once white extends, white is already locally alive. When black descends here, the ability to live locally like that is gone. So it's a very big difference to white's eye space. And this is something for a lot of the maybe double-digit Q players or lower single-digit Q players to think about. You know, as far as opening move value, we don't really like to play opening moves on the second line, but second line in the beginning of the game is okay if it's attacking the opponent's base or if it's removing the opponent's eye space. And in this case, S9 is threatening a very severe attack by removing the eye space from the white group. And white ignored it, which is a very big miss. Because now black is again all prepared to really bother this one. So this is another case of we don't really want to leave to play the big place when we've got these multiple weak groups on the board, because our opponent's going to get a lot more attacking our weak group than we're going to get taking our gote to play somewhere else. And then black jumps. This is a really strong move. Black is just very calmly building his box at the expense of this white group. Isn't black's box more efficient than white's? White wedges and connects, black connects, is very thick, and now white notices the problem. Uh-oh, white has to run. Now here, black chose to fly to the bottom with M3. It's playable, but black can do better. Attacking the left side would be really big now. Reason being is it's very difficult for us to get ahead of the white A stone now. White's head position is really fast and it's really, really far. If we can't easily surround white by directly getting ahead of it, for example, if we played something like this, we can imagine even just white jumping again, white's ahead of us, then we should try to surround it in the future. So for example, if black starts with moves around here or moves around G4, white can build black can build a presence at white's expense by asking white a lot of questions on the left-hand side. And then all of a sudden, white's head position at A will be behind enemy lines again naturally. It's a much better way to attack. It's a good attacking method. So here it's true, like even white could give up the stone. But black doesn't have to answer the exchange after the fact. This 1-2 is good enough for black to defend 4 stones from now, and then black can begin to play this move at 3, looking at how to get into A or block at B. And all the while also surrounding the C stone. But okay, white plays this to try to thicken the shape up, black blocks. And now here, white was supposed to get ahead of black again. When white doesn't get ahead of black, it gives black the opportunity to get ahead of white. This would be a vital point. because now white's head position, it's not possible to run west home anymore. White can only go north now. And the only thing that awaits for white to the north is a wall of enemy stones. We like to push our opponents towards the wall. But okay, so black chose to defend the right side box and then sort of cap this left-hand side white stone. It's possible to play this way. Just a little bit soft, like I mentioned. We can be a little bit more severe. C11 is not going to give the white C13 stone a lot of options, and it gives sort of me-eye connection idea, A and B, to get back home. But okay, white defended, and then black strikes at the white eye space in the center. And this is the case again. This is very much like his A move. I really like the B idea. I think Zogan had the right thought here. He just needed to go one farther. Because if he can find the weak point of diagonal here, which is this blocking the tiger's mouth, it's going to be Sente most of the time, because if white ignores it, black is prepared to cut. And if the cut is successful, white is not alive. White is going to be dead. So white is going to have to answer somehow. And that would give black the chance to run ahead of white. Now with the extra push here, with the building of this, black is beginning to make claims that the whole center could be a black moyo at the expense of this white right side group. It was a really clean idea. But unfortunately, this one was just a little too soft again. So white blocks and tries to build some eye space. This one I just notated for a lot of the key players that might watch it. This is another sort of classic bad exchange. Please, please, please. Capital please. Do not make this A for B push unless you're intending to cut something. The only thing that you accomplish by doing this is burning a liberty. And when you are nearly surrounded and possibly going to die locally, it's almost never a good idea. You'd rather keep the liberty open. Just oftentimes it becomes a really bad exchange. Just don't do it. And then black defended, but it was a little too slack, really. Black could have just attacked white directly. If white tries to come out something like this, then black can surround white. It takes a little bit of reading, but it's actually quite strong. There wasn't really much for white to be doing. But okay, both players decide to swim at the right-hand side a little bit, and white is now, unfortunately, creating another group here. And then white decides again, okay, one weak group is never enough. White needs to leave two weak groups for black to attack. So that is exactly what white did. This is the sort of same idea that white had with A and with B. We sort of see it rearing its head again. Some classic examples in professional games of where pros might do something like this. They refer to the strategy as shinogi. It means to outlast, leave a weak group dangling for the opponent to attack, but you follow hard on his heels by taking profit or cash elsewhere. It's part of an overall whole board strategy called amashi. And it seems like maybe that's sort of what white's natural stylistic preference is. But even in the amashi strategy, you're almost never dangling two weak groups. It's usually only ever one. And it's not something that I typically recommend Q players do unless they're specifically trying to learn how to handle weak groups. Because it's just the fastest way for you to end up in a position where you end up dead. And so black launches the attack. White begins to run. White cut, but it doesn't quite work. And then here, black could have... that's true. It could be they don't know when the group is weak, but there's good criteria for that. And it's basically the three things that you want to check off is, do I have a base? Can I make eyes? And do I have clean access to the center when my opponent plays first? In all three of those cases. If your opponent plays first, creates a no situation for any two out of those three, your group is not okay and it needs a move to defend itself. People can learn that by trial and error. There's a lot of Go content out there for people that are curious about that sort of thing. Here, I think black went wrong. Black is supposed to Hane. This is a must move. If black Hane is here, there's really not much white can do, because at this point, this Hane doesn't work. Black B is Atari. There's no this. White is dead. So if white connects something like this, then black is cut, and it's the double Atari situation again. White can't really do anything. If white extends something like this, black can simply jump, and the whole white position will collapse. A bit of a reading exercise, but one that I would encourage the players of this game, if they see this review, to read out on their own time, how white collapses from here. Because once black allows white out, now white has chances. So then building and then white cut. This cut unfortunately just didn't work. Sometimes it can work if you have an exchange similar to this where black would need to answer and white can run. And there's like a miai. Unfortunately, just this one was not working. And pretty much from now, it's just comfortably leading for black. There's not really going to be much more places for white to make territory. White might get a jump around A, which will be worth about 6 points. If white can get to B, it's big endgame. C is big endgame. The D area is big endgame. But even if white got all of that endgame, white's still losing by a decent amount. So with that being said, if the players are not present, I'm going to go ahead and move on. If the players are present and they have questions, then please feel free to ask. This is another case of very much like the first one. What white could have done to sort of improve their chances was just not leave so many weak groups behind. When you are surrounded by a lot of opponent's stones, more stones than your own, and you don't have eyes, a base, or clean access to the center when they play first, it's probably not the right time to leave for the big place. All right, so moving on to our last game. This one was Sunship 8Q versus Wayne C 6Q. I believe white won this game something like Coney. Let's take a look at the beginning from now. This one I think I had the least amount of comments for. Like one of the previous games, black has invited white to play the Avalanche, only instead of going for this even more complicated variation, black is playing a more standard invitation to the Nadare, and white is extending to try to prevent some of these complications. Black extends, and we get a pretty standard sequence until now. Here, white does something that's a little bit rare. This attachment is a Joseki, but not one that I typically see. It's a bit older. It was very, very popular in the 70s, 60s, and 70s. Much more common in the modern era of Go would be to jump at 1 and 2. You could consider exchanging A, but then you're probably going to pincer something like B or C. This is one of the local Joseki white can think about. White can also consider to play away from now. Tanuki to F3 is possible, for example. If black connects, white can simply descend. If the block happens, white can live underneath. So many methods for white, but okay, we play this one. Black plays the Hane, white plays the Hane. We get Atari. And now normally in this situation, even though it seems weird, white actually usually connects. If black plays something like this, then there's cutting points white can think about how to utilize in the future to move against Q7. But white is planning on the trading variation. Now, when you play this one, the follow-up Atari is usually very important. This exchange helps white shape a lot. When white backs off to 3, now when black plays this P2 cut, it's a cut and not a Hane. And the white block at 5 becomes more like a Sente. When black takes, white can fix. And now when black Hane is at 8, this Hane does not come with Sente because white's outside position is already quite stable. This is a very important detail in this Joseki because what ends up happening is white defends prematurely, allowing black the chance to Hane here. And now it's a different story. Now there is no this white block because black will capture the 1 stone and white will be in bad shape. So all white can do is extend. And extending like this, black can then play here, and white does not yet have the turn at O2. If white Tanuki somewhere, then later black can push here. If jump, then Atari or wedge. The white shape is just a little bit worse without the O2 turn. So it's a big difference in shape when you have that Q2 for R3 exchange versus not having it. So a small little miss by white with P5. But then black makes a slightly similar miss, playing the peep instead of P2. Now some people might be a little bit reserved to play this P2 Hane. They might think it's a bit slow. But actually white can't really ignore it. because afterwards the Atari is just too painful. White doesn't have any eye space. Even we can do something like this. The whole white group is under severe pressure. So white would have to extend. Remember, if we think of the 3 boxes we need to tick off, white does not yet have eyes, white does not yet have a base. So white needs to try to get those things to be stable. But okay, we got the peep and then the peep. Very clearly, black's plan is to try to concentrate the white shape. If I'm white in this case, I would prefer to allow black to cut for the purpose of maintaining good shape. White could think about something like this, and then maybe white will play some pincer. If black ever retakes the ko, then white is pretty much good on the outside already. Instead, what white does is white connects with this b2 bomber, and this b2 bomber is just a little bit bad shape for white. Doesn't really give white a good semblance of eye space. It doesn't really give white a base. It's just basically this double 3 stone wall where white for some reason has a wasted stone at A. Now in the position, black has a slightly weird stone at B, so it's not the end of the world, but definitely not the best result for white locally. Black should again play this P2 Hane. This is still quite big. Black opts to Hane the other way instead. So okay, that's certainly something. White can exchange this now and then do any kind of pincer here pretty much. It can be this one, it can be the low one. And if white can settle this group, it'll be an okay game for white. Instead, white plays away. It's a little bit fast. Again, we'll notice this is the theme of a lot of tonight's reviews. Players playing away a little too quickly, sort of dangling their weak groups. And so now it's black's privilege to attack again, and black really just needs to play this move at 1. The whole marked white group is very heavy and lacking eyes, and is very, very difficult. Even we use the gentle method. It's very, very difficult for white to fight this way. It's quite a painful situation for white to be in. But okay, so if we ignore the bottom right corner for now, both sides play a Joseki. Slight modernization could be made here. Black could play 1. Honestly, if you prefer the connect Joseki, you can still play it. There's nothing wrong with P17. This is just a more modern way. It's very, very, very similar. There's just slightly different Aji later. And then instead of playing high, white chooses to play the knight's move. It's slightly worse locally than jumping, but it's still playable. And then black approaches. So again, we're missing the importance of A, but if we're just assuming that the players didn't really have it in their judgment as to why it was so big, then this move is making sense. White backs off, black slides, creates a strong group. By creating a strong position here, white's position here gets even worse. And then white is pinching on the top side. So here, maybe white was just jealous of what white perceived to be black territory on the top. It's very hard for black to take everything up there even now. That's partly to do with the fact that A undercuts the top side, and also partly to do with the Aji of B. Later, white can think about something like this, and white can use this to sort of break the upper side or force it to become very, very small. There's also possible for white to aim for like this type of pincer inside with the support of 1 and 3. There are many different ways white can do it. But the top side right now is not so urgent. Still defending this weak group is urgent. Black plays the Kosumi, white jumps. Black cuts white off. This is a very sharp move. Now the 2 white stones floating inside are next to black thickness, and they don't have a base. So white needs to find one of those and hopefully find one of those fairly quickly. Presumably black is not going for this because black was calculating that the ladder does not work. So black opts for the Hane on this side, and then white bumps. So usually white is going to play this extension. The idea being that if black has to come back and connect something like this, white can fly, get out to center almost as alive directly. White can also play this peep first and then fly. This will help cover any Aji at 6. But when white doesn't do this one, then of course black had the right to cut if black so chose, and black did choose. But this one turns back on the ladder. If black doesn't want to deal with the ladder, black can connect. So white played the ladder, and then this is where black starts to go a little bit wrong. This cut is not really a necessary exchange for black. It's a bit over aggressive. You play this type of way when white is surrounded and you're trying to falsify an eye. But here the plan should not necessarily be to falsify the eye. Right now we have a ladder that looks something like this. This is a resource to black if black leaves it on the board, because it means if black ever plays anywhere around the triangle points, so it could be on the triangle points directly, or it could be any of the square points next to them. Any of these threaten to break this ladder, and if black can get another one in Sente, and for example, let's say this was Sente against the corner and white had to answer, then black is going to be able to extract that stone at 3, and there's a very good argument that white A is going to be dead. And if white is like, oh crap, I have to capture, then all of a sudden this move at C8 that's usually an overplay had to be answered with a very low value move at white 2. White 2 capturing the one stone is going to make white closer to life, but it's not going to make white a lot of territory up there. The top was kind of no man's land for points anyway. So white's not really getting a lot of points taking that stone. White's only slightly improving the position of the top group. It's still not quite alive yet, but it's closer to living. And in exchange, black is getting quite a nice attack against white's bottom left corner. White would like to play A, but the attack coming is quite severe, and if white, for example, jumps, then black is able to block. It's quite good for black. So I think this exchange really benefited white a lot. The A stone itself is not particularly useful when white has the ability to escape. And overall, black ended in Gote and white got to play the first move. Again, white needed to fix the bottom right corner, but if we ignore that, any move white played on the left side was fine. White could jump, white could extend, game move was okay. All of these were options. Black tries to go after the white corner, so white just lived. Here, white might have missed a small opportunity. We have to recognize that this black group has a bit of Dame Zamari. There's a bit of a liberty shortage. There's no way for white to directly cut the black group. We can sort of see that if white tries to cut, it's a Geta. There's no way to escape. But white can peep the cut and then jump to the center. And this is doing a couple of really good things for white. It's creating extra stability for the marked group as a whole. This group is building a lot of eye space at the center. But also the entirety of the black group at 2 is not alive now, which means that this move at D9 that white originally played to remove black's move on the left-hand side now has some attacking pressure. It was a good chance. But okay, white missed it, and then black started forcing white to defend. This 1-for-2 exchange, even though there are cutting points and black did play one in the game, the cuts don't exactly work, so I still wouldn't make it. And ultimately what ended up happening here, just small detail, center of 3. If it's like this, there's often a liberty shortage with the 3 black stones. I've gone ahead to show that liberty shortage here. Black cannot fix because it's connect and die. White tries to engineer that in a slightly different way, but because white played the wrong move order, black is able to escape. But during the game, what ended up happening, white was able to live, and then black played this move, which was to nuking black's own weak group. The corner was very strong. Black just needed to keep pushing to get space, and then eventually black's goal is to either jump to center or extend to center, try to live independently in the middle. But black does not manage to succeed with this. Going through a little bit further, what ends up happening from this point is black is basically weak group A. Black's got the weak stone at C, B. There's a weak group at C, and white closes the game out from this position. All right, that leaves us with about 2 minutes to spare. I think the next person on is going to be Clausius. I think it's usually Sean. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the screen share from here. Thanks everybody that came out for the review, and I will see everyone next week again on Wednesday. Adios. Alrighty, that was the NAOL reviews.